Women over 60 never accept any man who does these 5 things, or you'll regret it. Barbara spent 18 months in a relationship with a man who was slowly eroding her sense of self-worth, and she didn't fully recognize it until her daughter confronted her at a family dinner. "Mom, why do you apologize for everything when Martin's around? You never used to be like that." Barbara opened her mouth to defend Martin, then stopped. Her daughter was right. She'd become a smaller, quieter, more anxious version of herself, constantly monitoring Martin's reactions, walking on eggshells to avoid his subtle disapproval. At 69, Barbara thought she was too experienced to fall into a toxic relationship pattern. She'd raised 3 children, navigated a 30-year marriage, built a successful career. But somehow, Martin had slipped past her defenses with charm and attentiveness that gradually transformed into control and criticism so subtle she'd almost missed it. Here's what women over 60 need to understand. The red flags that were easy to spot when you were younger become harder to see now. You've learned to be accommodating, to see both sides, to give people the benefit of the doubt. Those are beautiful qualities that manipulative men exploit brilliantly. And at this stage of your life, when your time and energy are finite resources, accepting a man who exhibits certain behaviors isn't just uncomfortable, it's destructive. Subscribe to this channel right now because we're about to identify the 5 specific behaviors that should make you walk away immediately, no matter how much you like him otherwise. These aren't differences in personality or minor annoyances. These are fundamental character patterns that indicate a man who will drain you, diminish you, and waste years you cannot get back. Let's make sure you can recognize them before you're in too deep. The first behavior you must never accept. He criticizes you in front of other people, then claims it was just a joke. This is psychological manipulation disguised as humor, and it's one of the most insidious forms of disrespect because it puts you in an impossible position. If you object, you're accused of being too sensitive or not having a sense of humor. If you stay silent, you've accepted public humiliation and taught him that you'll tolerate it. Linda was 64 when she started dating Thomas. For the first few months, he was attentive and complimentary, but gradually a pattern emerged. At dinner with friends, Thomas would make comments about Linda's cooking. "Well, she tries, but let's just say I've learned to appreciate takeout." Everyone would laugh and Linda would force a smile while feeling a sting of embarrassment. When his daughter visited, Thomas joked about Linda's technology struggles. "She's still trying to figure out how to unmute herself on Zoom. I've given up trying to teach her." At a family gathering, he commented on her appearance. "Linda's at that age where she's embraced the natural look, which is code for not bothering with makeup anymore." Each comment individually seemed minor. Each was followed by, "I'm just joking," or "Don't be so sensitive." But cumulatively, Thomas was systematically undermining Linda's confidence in front of the people whose opinions she valued, and framing her legitimate hurt as her failure to take a joke. Dr. John Gottman's research identifies contempt as one of the 4 horsemen that predict relationship failure. And public criticism disguised as humor is a form of contempt. It signals that he doesn't respect you, that your dignity is less important than his entertainment, and that he feels entitled to diminish you for social currency. Linda finally recognized the pattern when her sister pointed out, "He never makes himself the butt of his jokes. It's always you. That's not humor, that's hostility." Linda ended the relationship, and Thomas's response confirmed everything. He told her she was too uptight and couldn't handle a little teasing, making it clear that he'd never take responsibility for how his behavior affected her. Here's your standard. A man who respects you will never make you the punchline, especially in public. He'll celebrate your strengths and protect your dignity, not mine your vulnerabilities for laughs. If he criticizes you publicly and frames your objection as you lacking humor, he's telling you that his comfort with humiliating you matters more than your comfort with being treated respectfully. Walk away, because a man who tears you down in front of others is a man who doesn't value you, and he'll only escalate once he knows you'll accept it. The second behavior you must never accept. He tracks your time and questions your whereabouts like you're accountable to him. This shows up as concern at first. I was worried when you didn't text back, or I just wanted to make sure you got home safely. It sounds protective, even sweet, but gradually it transforms into surveillance. He wants to know where you are, who you're with, when you'll be home, why you took longer than expected. And if you resist providing that information, he frames you as suspicious or uncaring. Margaret was 67 when she noticed this pattern with Robert. At first, his check-ins seemed affectionate, but after a few months, Robert's questions became more specific and more frequent. If Margaret mentioned having lunch with a friend, Robert wanted to know, which friend? Where did you eat? How long were you there? Why didn't you mention it beforehand? When Margaret went to visit her daughter for a weekend, Robert called multiple times each day. If she didn't answer immediately, he'd text, "Where are you? I've been trying to reach you." Margaret started feeling anxious about not being accessible, modifying her plans to make sure she could always respond to Robert quickly. The turning point came when Margaret attended a book club meeting and forgot to charge her phone. When she got home 2 hours later, she had 14 missed calls and a series of increasingly agitated texts from Robert. He showed up at her house 20 minutes later, angry and accusatory. "I thought something had happened to you. How could you just disappear like that without telling me?" Margaret's adult son witnessed this interaction and was alarmed. "Mom, that's not normal. You're a grown woman who went to book club. Why is he acting like you owe him a minute-by-minute itinerary?" Dr. Lundy Bancroft, who works with abusive men, explains that this behavior is about power and control, not love or concern. A man who truly loves you trusts your judgment and respects your autonomy. A man who requires constant access to your time and location sees you as property he needs to monitor. Margaret ended the relationship when Robert responded to her concerns by saying, "If you have nothing to hide, why is it a problem to let me know where you are?" That statement revealed everything. He was framing normal privacy and independence as suspicious and normal accountability as love. Here's your standard. A man who respects you understands that you're an autonomous adult with your own life, friends, family, and activities. He doesn't require constant access to you or detailed explanations of your time. He trusts you. If he's tracking your whereabouts, questioning your activities, or making you feel guilty for normal independence, he's not being protective, he's being controlling. Walk away, because surveillance masquerading as concern will only intensify, and eventually you'll find yourself isolated, anxious, and unable to make decisions without his approval. The third behavior you must never accept. He compares you unfavorably to other women, especially his ex. Some men use comparison as a weapon. They'll mention how their ex-wife kept a spotless house, how their previous girlfriend was more easygoing, how their daughter handles things more efficiently. These comparisons serve a specific purpose, to keep you feeling inadequate and working harder to prove your worth. Dorothy was 66 when she started noticing this pattern with Michael. At first, the comparison seemed casual. "My ex-wife used to make this dish differently," or "my last girlfriend wasn't as sensitive about things." But gradually, the comparisons became more pointed and more frequent. Michael would mention that his ex-wife had stayed in better shape. She was really disciplined about the gym. It showed. He'd compared Dorothy's housekeeping unfavorably. Susan always had fresh flowers in the house, made it feel welcoming. He'd critique Dorothy's social skills. "My ex was better at small talk. She could work a room." Each comparison left Dorothy feeling slightly diminished, slightly insufficient. She found herself trying harder, buying flowers, joining a gym, monitoring how she interacted at social events. But nothing was ever quite enough, because Michael would simply find new areas to compare. Dorothy's breakthrough came during a conversation with her therapist, who asked, if he thought his ex was so wonderful, why isn't he still with her? That question reframed everything. Michael wasn't making accurate comparisons based on objective superiority. He was using comparison as a manipulation tactic to keep Dorothy insecure and compliant. Dr. Craig Malkin, who specializes in narcissistic relationships, explains that chronic comparison is a form of emotional abuse. It serves multiple functions. It keeps you working for approval that never comes. It establishes his ex as competition you can never beat. And it signals that you're constantly being evaluated and found wanting. When Dorothy confronted Michael about the pattern, his response was telling. I'm just being honest. Would you rather I lie? He was framing his cruelty as honesty and her legitimate hurt as her inability to handle truth. Here's your standard. A man who values you doesn't measure you against other women. He chose you and he appreciates who you are rather than cataloging ways you fall short of some idealized past. If he's chronically comparing you to his ex or other women, he's not trying to help you improve, he's trying to keep you feeling inadequate so you never feel confident enough to leave. Walk away. Because a man who constantly compares you to others doesn't actually want you. He wants a perfect fantasy that doesn't exist, and he'll spend your entire relationship punishing you for being human.
The fourth behavior you must never accept. He makes unilateral decisions about things that affect you both, then gets angry if you object. This reveals a fundamental lack of respect for you as an equal partner. He'll commit you to social plans without asking. He'll make purchases that affect your shared space without discussing it. He'll change arrangements without consulting you. And when you express concern, he'll frame you as controlling or difficult. Patricia was 65 when she experienced this repeatedly with David. He'd invite his adult children to visit without checking if the dates worked for Patricia. He'd make expensive purchases for his house, where Patricia spent significant time, without mentioning it until the item arrived. He'd cancel plans they'd made together because something more interesting came up, informing Patricia after the fact rather than discussing it. When Patricia objected, David's response was consistent. I didn't think it was a big deal, or I didn't realize I needed your permission, or you're being really controlling about this. He positioned himself as the reasonable one, making normal decisions, and Patricia as the difficult one, making unreasonable demands. The situation escalated when David planned a 3-week trip to visit his son, spanning dates that included Patricia's birthday. He didn't mention the trip until his tickets were booked. When Patricia expressed hurt that he hadn't discussed the timing with her, David was incredulous. Are you saying I need to ask your permission to visit my own son? That's ridiculous. Patricia's sister helped her see the pattern. He frames every objection you have as you trying to control him, when really you're just asking to be consulted about decisions that affect you. That's not control, that's basic respect. Dr. Harriet Lerner writes about how some people confuse autonomy with unilateral decision-making. A healthy relationship includes two autonomous people who still consult each other about decisions that affect the partnership. When someone consistently makes unilateral decisions and then resents being questioned, they don't actually want a partner, they want an audience. Patricia ended the relationship when she realized David's pattern would never change. His response confirmed her decision. He told her she was too needy and he needed a woman who was more independent, which was code for a woman who wouldn't expect to have input in decisions that affected her. Here's your standard. A man who respects you as an equal partner consults you about decisions that affect you both. He doesn't commit your time without asking. He doesn't make unilateral financial decisions that impact you. He doesn't cancel or change plans without discussion. If he consistently makes decisions that affect you without your input, then gets defensive when you object, he sees you as an accessory to his life, not a partner in it. Walk away, because a man who won't give you equal voice in decisions is a man who will eventually make every important choice without considering your needs, and you'll spend the relationship feeling powerless in your own life.
The fifth behavior you must never accept. He withholds affection, communication, or presence as punishment when you've displeased him. This is emotional withdrawal used as control. When you do something he doesn't like, he stops talking to you. He becomes cold and distant. He withholds physical affection. He punishes you with silence and absence until you apologize or change your behavior to appease him. And this pattern teaches you that his comfort is more important than addressing legitimate issues. Carol was 68 when she experienced this with Kenneth. Whenever Carol did something that bothered Kenneth, expressed a need, set a boundary, disagreed with him, he would shut down completely. He'd stop responding to texts. He'd cancel plans without explanation. He'd become cold and distant when they were together. The first time it happened, Kenneth disappeared for 3 days after Carol mentioned she needed more advance notice when he wanted to change plans. No calls, no texts, no explanation. When he finally contacted her, he acted as if nothing had happened and made no reference to her concern. The pattern repeated itself with increasing frequency. If Carol expressed any dissatisfaction or requested any change, Kenneth would withdraw emotionally and sometimes physically. Carol found herself carefully monitoring what she said, avoiding bringing up concerns and walking on eggshells to prevent triggering his withdrawal. Carol's daughter recognized the pattern before Carol did. "Mom, you're being trained like a dog. Every time you express a need, he punishes you with silence. So you've learned to stop expressing needs. That's not love. That's conditioning." Dr. Sue Johnson, developer of emotionally focused therapy, identifies withdrawal as one of the most damaging relationship patterns because it creates an environment where one partner cannot safely express needs or concerns. When withdrawal is used as punishment rather than genuine need for space, it's emotional abuse. When Carol finally confronted Kenneth about the pattern, he denied it was deliberate. "I just need time to process when you're upset with me. I can't help that." But Carol had learned to distinguish genuine processing from punitive withdrawal. Kenneth never took time to process his own behavior, only Carol's concerns about his behavior. And his processing never led to change or repair, only to Carol eventually giving up the issue to restore connection. Here's your standard. A man who respects you doesn't punish you with withdrawal when you express needs or concerns. He might need brief time to cool down, but he comes back to address the issue. He doesn't weaponize your attachment to him by threatening it every time you displease him. If he consistently withdraws affection, communication, or presence as punishment, he's training you to never challenge him, and eventually you'll disappear entirely into his preferences. Walk away, because a man who punishes you with withdrawal will turn your relationship into a hostage situation, where you're constantly working to avoid his displeasure, and you'll lose yourself completely trying to keep him present.
Here's what these 5 behaviors share. They're all forms of control that diminish your autonomy, erode your self-worth, and train you to prioritize his comfort over your own well-being. And here's the critical truth that women over 60 often resist. These patterns do not improve. They escalate. Barbara stayed with Martin for 18 months, hoping his behavior would change, that her love would soften his criticism, that time would make him more respectful. It didn't.
By the time she left, she'd lost friendships because Martin had made social events so uncomfortable. She'd stopped pursuing hobbies he subtly mocked. She'd become a smaller, quieter, less confident version of herself. Linda, Margaret, Dorothy, Patricia, Carol, all of these women eventually walked away from men who exhibited these behaviors. None of them regretted leaving. Every single one regretted not leaving sooner. At 60 and beyond, you don't have time to waste on men who diminish you. You don't have energy to spare on relationships that require constant vigilance and self-editing. You don't have years to give to someone who sees you as an object to control rather than a person to cherish. When you see these behaviors, you have a choice. You can tell yourself, he doesn't mean it. He's just stressed. He'll change when he sees how much you love him. Or you can recognize these patterns as fundamental character issues that predict exactly how this relationship will feel 5 years from now. Exhausting, diminishing, and increasingly painful. The right man doesn't do any of these 5 things. He doesn't criticize you publicly. He doesn't track your whereabouts. He doesn't compare you to other women. He doesn't make unilateral decisions about shared matters. He doesn't withdraw affection as punishment. He treats you with consistent respect, values your autonomy, appreciates who you are, includes you in decisions, and repairs rather than retreat when there's conflict. That man exists, but you'll never find him if you're wasting your limited time and energy on men who exhibit these 5 toxic behaviors. So, if the man you're dating or in a relationship with does any of these things, you have one job. Walk away. Not next month after you've tried one more time to communicate your needs. Not next year after you've given him more chances. Now. Because every day you spend accepting these behaviors is a day stolen from the life you deserve. Leave a comment below if you've experienced any of these patterns. Share what helped you recognize the behavior and what gave you the strength to leave. And share this video with women who need permission to walk away from men who are slowly eroding their sense of self. You deserve a man who makes your life bigger, not smaller, who celebrates your strength rather than exploiting your vulnerabilities, who treats your dignity as sacred rather than expendable. Never accept less. I'll see you in the next video.